Right. My name is Richard Smith. Apart from running around this room, I'm also a development manager and developer at Dyalog. And it's my pleasure to introduce Kai Jäger to you this morning. I'm sure most of you already know him. For those of you that don't, he's based in the UK. And he has a very good habit of finding the bugs before everybody else. So you have him to thank for quality of the product. I had a look this morning. 1 in 14 of the bugs in the system is yours. So that's quite a fair few. So thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, I'm independent IT consultant working for 3 clients. One of them is Dyalog, which is interesting because every client expects you to work 100% for them, which sometimes poses a problem. And it depends pretty much on what you are doing for a client, whether you are absolutely happy with the environment or not. Let me explain. FIRE stands for find and replace. And when you have to deal with legacy code, it's very different than from creating new code. One of my clients is Paul Mansour. He creates a relational database in APL. It's a brand new product, so he knows exactly what he is doing. There is no legacy, and when he wants to change something, he has all freedom to do so, because so far we have just one user. On the other hand, working for Optima, it's very different. There are thousands of lines of code. The application is running roughly 20 years, Paul. There are roughly 20 programmers involved, not right now, over time. Every programmer has its own ideas how to solve a problem, so there is no common architecture or design. There's no design whatsoever, more precisely. Every APL programmer tends to bring along his own utilities, which means if you have 20 programmers, you have 21 utilities to solve the uppercase problem. Well, in short, as many approaches as people are involved, which is a nightmare, of course. And over time, the code starts to smell. Or as Stephen would put it, it goes sour. And it becomes more and more difficult to implement a change, because when you change something, we all know we change something there and it breaks something else. That's not new, but if you change something there and you break it in 15 different places and you have no idea why, then clearly something is wrong. And you need to improve the situation, because otherwise the cost for changing anything is simply too high. And your customer would probably agree with that. So what is the escape route? Refactoring. What exactly is refactoring? The Wikipedia says refactoring is usually motivated by noticing a code smell. For example, the method at hand may be very long, or it may be a near duplicate of another nearby method, which is basically a violation of the DIY principle. Don't repeat yourself. If you handle the same problem, doing something in many different places in a different way, and you need to change that one day, you are likely to forget some of the instances. If you have it just in one place, you change that one place and the problem is gone. But that's not the topic of today's talk, so let's carry on. Once recognized, such problems can be addressed by refactoring the source code or transmitting it into a new form that behaves the same as before, but that no longer smells. The problem is to convince your customer, because the customer wants to see new features, or at least a bug fix. If you come along and say, I've invested 2 weeks in refactoring the code, it's exactly doing the same thing as before, and I would like to charge you for that, it might be a little bit difficult. However, on the long run, it's in the interest of the customer, of course, because the cost of maintaining and adding is less expensive than without doing that. But when you do more refactoring, I'm not ready yet. For a long routine or a smaller subroutine can be extracted. For duplicate routines, the duplication can be removed and replaced with one shared function. Failure to perform refactoring can result in accumulating technical debt. Technical debt is the expression used nowadays in IT to say, if you go a short route, saying, I'm not interested in test cases or in a property sign, I have to deliver next week, Wednesday, then you go for a technical debt, because one day either you throw that damn thing away, that might be okay or not, or you have to change things, because otherwise on the long run it's going to be very expensive. There's nothing wrong with going for a technical debt, because the deadline next week, Wednesday, might be extremely important. And your customer might even say, yeah, I know that, carry on, but keep the deadline, and later on we discuss the rest. The problem is often that a customer doesn't recognize that, or is not even being told. He is happy to see the deadline is reached, and that's the end of that. Typical task when you refactor is replacing stuff, redesigning, and of course also deleting stuff. Often after refactoring, the code is shorter, has less functions, less lines, whatever. In other words, what we are looking for is something which allows us to search efficiently, and that allows us to replace stuff. And there we are. There is a built-in search facility in Dyalog, but it has a couple of issues. First of all, I'm personally particularly annoyed by the fact that autocomplete in lookin is not available. It doesn't even have a memory, which is very annoying, because you have to enter the same thing over and over again. And if you make a typo, you might actually be troubled by finding out what exactly was the typing. Right, this is lowercase rather than uppercase. You can't ignore comments when searching. You cannot restrict your search to just text if you want to improve documentation rather than code, for example. You cannot restrict search to comments, ignoring text and code. And you cannot search the last search, which would be very valuable if you want to restrict the number of hits further by a completely different expression. And you cannot negate a search, searching for quad IO, but with the result of being interested in all functions who do not have quad IO is not possible. And it cannot deal with circular references. In the past, it Apple caught. Now, when you have circular references, it carries on for a while, and that's it. Completely exhausted. I have to stop here. I have no idea what the result will be, but at least I'm not Apple coring. But the most important thing is there is no replace at workspace level. There's no replace whatsoever. So a couple of issues. Fire is designed to rescue us from this situation. You can't read this probably, it doesn't matter because it comes up with the GUI. I'm calling it via F in a development workspace. F just executes the call hash.fire.run with a 0 as the right argument. It's a shortcut. That's a GUI of Fire. These blue icons give you an opportunity to enter the helpline, the help file, if there is a question. But for a short overview, hovering the mouse over a control, give you a tip explaining what it is. In this case, it's trivial, but there are others which might actually be more of interest. So let's look for something. Let's search for quad IO. And it tells you that it found 758. It's nice. It doesn't work. Normally I'm using the external Zoom facility, but sometimes it doesn't work. 758 hits found in 321 objects. 4,905 APL objects are currently in the workspace. As you can see from the list, there are plenty of hits. Let's restrict this. When you type in the search looking for, you get a autocomplete mechanism, which allows us to restrict the search to certain namespaces or even subnamespaces. It's working exactly the same way as the Dyalog autocompletion, so when you press curler right, you select the proper line and the search is restricted to that particular namespace. There is no hit, and I can cut back the list by pressing the Enter key, the Del key, sorry, to what it was, and do it again. Now we have a restricted list. If I press F8, it tries to expand the size of the GUI to exactly the needed size, which is not possible in this case because the number of hits is too high, which is a nice feature if you want to easily expand the window to the desired size. Now you have all sorts of opportunities to set options. As you can see, all these are options. Now the problem with that is if you set an option for a certain case and then you forget about that and later on you perform another search, you might well end up with a list and say, what? No hit? I know exactly there is at least one because you forgot setting the option. And Paul Grosvenor came up with an ingenious idea when we discussed the problem. When you go away from your default setting, it gets red. So when you look at it, you can immediately realize that is not my default or pre-deferred setting. And you can do this on several things. They all go red. But there is, on the right side, a Restore Default button, which allows you to go back to your normal settings with just a single click. Everything is back to black. On the other hand, if you prefer to change your settings, you can do this via the file menu by saying the current setting is going to be my new default. And it remembers that in the Windows registry for you. By the way, I forgot to mention, of course, both the search for as well as the search in box have a history as well. But the history is not only specific to a certain user, it is also specific to a certain workspace. So if you load another workspace and fire again for the first time, it will be empty and it will accumulate what you enter for that workspace in the Windows registry. And it is even smart enough to realize that after a year you are unlikely to search that thing again, so it throws it away. It's not growing forever. The options match case and match APL name, I think, are quite obvious, and I don't need to say anything about this. Match number is slightly different. Match number is of interest when you are searching for one particular number in your workspace, say setting a variable to the value 9999 or something like that. Then this is the right option to go. You can exclude certain objects by unticking these options, and you can take a shortcut if you like to. You can search the full source code, which means everything is searched. But more importantly, you can ignore comments if you like to. Or you want to go for just comments or for text only. As you can see, it's smart enough to work out which options are valid or not valid for certain operations. You can restrict the search to names only, which means not the code is scanned, but the quad NL is scanned, which is in a workspace of a certain size significantly faster. And sometimes you are only interested in names anyway. Remember workspaces after loading having 50,000 or 57,000, right? 57,000 objects after loading a workspace. You think twice before searching all the functions in the workspace for something, because it will take quite a while. You can search the headers only, ignoring anything else. if you are interested in finding out whether something isn't localized, which should be localized. And you can search just for locals, which means that the names of arguments and results are ignored. Again, when you hover over it, you get the information what's exactly is going to happen. And of course, you can specify recursive searches, but sometimes you only want to search root rather than any subname spaces. You can negate a search, and you can restrict the search to the hit list, if there is any. And you can even tell Jäger. Now, Jäger is a code management system written by Phil Last for FlipDB, which I think is fair to say will become open source at one stage or another. The trouble with code management source systems is that when somebody is doing something which is not controlled by the editor or generally by a quad fix or quad fx system function, the source code management wouldn't know. So when you do something like that, you have to tell the code management system, and that's exactly what Fire is doing. If you tick that checkbox and there is an Jäger instance, it will tell Jäger about any changes. So let's look at some real examples. Let's assume that I would like to change the name of functions called uppercase to, say, toUpper. Thanks. Why can't I enter this box? I have no idea. If I press a find button, it finds a couple of instances in the A2 namespace. Now, there are a couple of issues. For example, there is a variable listed. My aim is to rename function calls from uppercase to toUpper. I'm not interested in variables at all. The solution to the problem is to untick the variables checkbox. There is another solution going via the context menu and remove vars from the list altogether, which in this case is absolutely fine. But imagine a situation where the hit list has, say, 800 entries. You don't want to use this, 50 times or so. There must be a way to do this automatically. So for this very short list, the context menu offers the help needed. For a very long list, we need a different mechanism. There are other issues. Let's do the find. We got rid of the variables. We can also select all of them and edit them from this window in order to find out what's going on. And we realize this one, for example, is not calling or referencing the function I'm interested in. It just uses a local variable uppercase. While this one actually calls a function uppercase. This one has just a comment uppercase. This one has a function uppercase which needs to be renamed to toUppercase. And this one uses uppercase in a way which is not what we are looking for. So there are a couple of issues which I'm going to address now. First of all, I click these two options, which will solve a couple of problems, and also I ignore comments. I'm now much closer to what I'm actually looking for. There is still one obstacle, and that is this function. Because by definition, uppercase in this case is a local variable. And I'm not interested in this one altogether. I haven't found a good way yet to deal with this problem. So for the time being, it's up to the user to deal with the problem. Again, this can be done via the context menu by excluding that entry from the list, but we will see that in the replace dialog, there might be a much easier way to deal with that. So finally, let's go for a replace operation. And that is the really important stuff, because what we've seen so far is nice to have, but I probably wouldn't have invested a long time in implementing this just to make searching in the workspace a little bit easier than it is with the built-in capability. What I'm really interested in is the replace feature. Now, this offers you the opportunity to specify a replace by, which is easy. You can copy this one over here and then edit it to make it a little bit easier. And then you can decide whether you would like to deal with the stuff in one go or one by the other, which is probably easy to understand when we just do it. Right, I forgot to do something about this. Up. One by one means that it uses a third-party tool called Compare It and shows you the differences. You can now decide what to do. You can accept the change. You can even edit the damn thing. And when you're ready, you close it, confirm the save operation, and in APL it will read back the file, which is of course used in the background for doing that, and offers you the opportunity either to fix the change or to skip this one or to cancel the whole operation. Let's skip this one and carry on with the next one, and you get the idea why this is called one by one. This is fine occasionally, but again, if you do a change operation which involves, say, 800 functions, you're not really interested in doing this, right? It will take ages. So let's cancel that and do it again. This time we go in for all in one go. And let's say we get a full report. This is something I've built into when one user was extremely concerned at that stage and said, when I now press start, it's going to change my workspace, right? I said, no, it's not. I said, right. How do I know that? So I built in this dialog clearly stating the workspace won't change yet. The final decision is still to be made. And what you get is a list with all the objects involved. They are fully listed, and the changes are highlighted in a different color. And my advice is to go through that list very, very, very carefully. Because I can tell you from experience, I checked on several occasions the first 5 pages of, in one case, I think 1,000, and said, okay, I know what I'm doing. It's clearly right. So I pressed fix and realized later, almost. But there were a couple of things which weren't quite as I expected that. Now, full is the full report, which is displaying the whole damn thing. You won't see a big difference in this case because the objects are very short. But if you have functions with 50 or 100 or 200 lines, it's a very different thing. It might be even difficult to scroll to the actual hits. So normally you would go for a compressed report, which is the default, as you can see, which means that you see just the changes and nothing else, plus the header lines. The header is always displayed even if it is not going to change, because the information which locals you have is so important that I've decided that should be available in any case. And as you can see in one instance, the first one, it's a rename of the local variable, which we are not interested in. The second one is actually a call. That's what we are looking for, to change that one. We want to rename the function, and we want to rename this one, but we don't want to rename this one. And only now do we realize this if it is a large list. So it would be nice to have an opportunity right now to say the first one and the last one are not actually interested in this. And you can achieve that by unticking the, oh, this is not visible for you. That is bad. Let me do it this way. You can untick the checkboxes, meaning ignore those, and you can see from the color scheme they are getting gray. They won't take part in the actual change process. And it also says in the status bar clearly 2 of the 5 items are not selected right now. And when you click OK, you have to make your mind up. That's when it's going to become serious, because now what actually happens in the background, it creates 2 files. One component file keeps all the original versions, and the second component file keeps the changed ones. And if you click on Fix Now, it will fix all the changed ones in the component file. And there is no undo for that, as you can imagine. So either you take a copy of the workspace or you really know what you're doing. So that was an easy example. Let's go for something slightly more sophisticated.
If you rename a function, is it smart enough to delete the old one, or do you end up with 2 copies, the old and
You
the
end
new?
up with 2 copies. You have to deal with this yourself. I was thinking about this, but quite often it's not clear what the user's intention are. Is he really trying to rename that function, or is he going to take a copy? Maybe I should ask for this, something like that.
And if you're using salt and you've done a snap where each object in the workspace is in a different file, does it know to create a new file for the newly named function?
Sorry, I didn't get that question.
If you've used snap to copy your entire workspace out to a whole set of different files, one for each object, and you do a rename on a function, what you really want is not only to delete the old function, but also have a new salt file for that new object. Does it do that kind of stuff?
Yes and no. There is a command which solves that problem.
I think what you're saying is that you want to know if the salt tag is going to be kept when it's renamed or modified. Is that your question?
I want to know if the entire salt file structure is kept in sync with the changes that result from using this tool.
I don't think it would modify the salt structure itself, but salt would probably lose its tag if the function is modified in some way.
No. I'm not saving the file automatically for you, because I'm not sure whether this is your intention or not. But there is a menu command, list changed salted scripts, which means if you change something in the script which is controlled by salt, afterwards you can find out. And it will preserve the subname space in the script. You know, when a script is under the control of salt, it has a subname space called salt_data, and that keeps a couple of properties which allow salt actually to deal with the damn thing. Among them is a timestamp and the file name and stuff like that. Now, if I change that by refixing the script, the subname space would go away, and the damn thing is not under the control of salt any longer. And of course, that is not acceptable. So Fire is dealing with that and preserves the namespace. That is done automatically for you. But still, it doesn't save. It doesn't execute a salt save command. But you can find out after a Fire session by executing that command, which gives you a list of all the scripts which got fixed, and then you can make up your mind whether you would like to save them on file or not.
Something I think that once you've run your function, if you ran snap again, snap would discover all the things that have been changed and would save them automatically.
This is another option to solve the problem, yeah.
Come again?
This is another way
this
to
is
solve
another
the problem.
option. This is another way to do this.
Now, the release I've shown you right now is slightly different from the one which is currently available on the APL wiki. This time I'm firing up fire not from the workspace, but I'm using a user command, square bracket fire, which shows the old version. And the major improvement I made compared with this version is that one feature was removed. That might be a surprise, because normally you add features. In this case, I took away a feature. And the reason is that the couple of people using Fire so far, almost all of them, I think, at one stage or another, asked how exclude works and what exactly the implications are. And I realized that in order to answer the question, I had to look into the help file and remember what I've done. And then I realized that it must be wrong. If the author can't answer the question immediately, I made a mistake. It's too complex. So I decided to get rid of it. Unfortunately, this very complex damn thing solved the problem I've shown you earlier with local variables and dynamic functions. It could be used for that, and that was the original intention. But still, if you need to read the manual and think 30 minutes about this, it's not really of help. So this damn thing was excluded. And there are two steps how to exclude it. The first one we are not interested in. I changed that GUI, so this part is not visible any longer, and the code dealing with that has disappeared from Fire. But there are also test cases. Fire comes with an extensive set of test cases. And the test cases naturally use the settings in the GUI for the test cases. They can't work any longer. They would produce a value error. So this is a perfect example, because I need now to go through all the test cases, find out where they use the ignore something, the internal variables. All the names are ignore nothing, ignore localized, and ignore not localized. So I need to get rid of them. And in order to do that, I can search for ignore. I know that, you can't, so you have to believe me. That is what we are interested in. And we only want to search that in the test cases. That's what we are interested in. And we get a list which has 217 hits in 72 functions. Quite a long list. And the next step is obviously to run the change thing. But in this case, I don't want to change, actually. I want to delete, because the lines in the test cases which set those three variables are of no need anymore, or that's what I was thinking when I did this. Now, there is an option here, delete lines with hits. That is a special case when you not only want to replace a certain expression by a blank string, which would remove the line, but the lines still exist. In this case, I want to get rid of the lines. So I tick the delete lines with hits, which at the same time, as you can imagine, sets this field empty and makes it gray, because it doesn't make sense anymore right now. And what it shows is these lines. The default is ignore nothing, state is 1, and the other two are 0. 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0. And that is a situation where you might end up saying, oh, look, I know what I'm doing. I can now fix all the stuff, delete all the lines. And again, my advice is carry on until you have checked all of them, because I was wrong. And it becomes apparent why I was wrong in a second. Look at this. This one is setting ignore nothing to 0 and ignore not localized to 1. That was not what I expected, and then I realized, of course, I had test cases which dealt with the exclude stuff. They are just designed for that purpose, and of course they are different. In this case, it doesn't help to delete the line. The test case as such is now superfluous. I need to get rid of that. It doesn't harm, in this case, to change them, but I have to keep in mind I want to delete them. Now, again, that is a perfect example for realizing number 10 I'm not really interested in, so let's take that out and carry on and check the next ones until we get to the very end and realize, okay, that's it. We are done. When we search for ignore now, again, we get just the one we've excluded. Okay? And the context menu now would give us all sorts of opportunities to deal with the problem. It's always a surprise, you know, when I'm talking, my inner clock is telling me I've started 10 minutes ago, and I realize I have 10 minutes, but it's not exactly the same thing. The context menu gives us a large number of opportunities to deal with all sorts of problems. Among them, in this case, is delete, test, replace from the workspace. And maybe I should talk about the other options as well. Stuff like editing or select all or invert current selection. There is no need to explain those. Remove all situated in a certain namespace, however, are of more interest. Let me explain that in a more complex example. Sometimes you realize from such a list, right, I'm interested in almost everything, but in nothing that is contained in the namespace A. There are two solutions to the problem. The first one is you can, remove all situated in namespace A from the list. That would get rid of everything. But I might also realize it's not only A, I'm not interested in 2 or even 3, in which case the command remove all objects of namespace ... You know, the ... according to the Windows convention means it's not a command that is executed. There will be a dialog afterwards talking to you. And that gives you a precise option to deal with the situation. You can now select which ones to delete. And if you are only interested in top-level objects, you can reduce that to the couple of objects found in the root itself. Which brings the hit list down to just 35 hits. There are also options available, for example, to copy the name of, in this case, fire copy to... Did that work? That wasn't what I tried to say. That was what I tried to say. Problems. Unfortunately, there are a few problems. The first one is when you edit a function from this menu, this time it works. Normally it works. In very rare circumstances, all the menu entries in the editor remain inactive. And when I tried to show this to Morten, guess what happened? It didn't work. It didn't work. Oh, it depends from which angle. I could demonstrate the problem. And I think that happens once every 2 months or so, and I'm using this extensively, so very, very rarely. The solution to the problem is, however, easy. You close down the editor and restart it, and it will work. So if you come across a problem using it, that's not a permanent problem. This is a temporary and very rare problem. The second one is much more annoying. When you search for a certain thing, the likelihood is that occasionally you start the editor in order to replace it in the editor rather than with the general replace feature. Now, when I'm doing this, that was the wrong one. Yeah, right. In this case, R doesn't start the replace dialog, it simply reformats with the box. What's going on? Here it is. When you were looking for something in Fire, say ABC, and now you are in the editor because you want to replace ABC by XYZ, there's a problem. In the built-in tool, it's smart enough to pre-populate the search for field with the search you were looking for. I can't do this because that is internal to the interpreter. What I can do is I can put it into the clipboard, so you simply insert it. But that is very rude behavior. And on one occasion, I myself defeated the purpose because I had a complex thing in the clipboard which I intended to use somewhere else, and I overwrote that with my Fire action. So I'm going to take that out, actually, or replace it by a dialog saying, shall I copy that into the clipboard or not? But this is too much, and I would really like to look forward for a solution to that problem by dialog. And I think you confirmed to look into the problem. So there will be a solution, hopefully at one stage or another. So that is Fire. Now, you can download Fire from the APL Wiki, where there is an entry called Apple Tree, an open source library, which in turn, I've already opened it here, so. Which offers a significant number of utilities, but also tools, and Fire is considered to be a tool. That is the homepage of Fire, and at the very bottom, you can go to the download page and download the latest stable version or the development branch. There it is. There's also a user command available, so you don't have to worry about this as well. And you can simply download the user command and put it into the salt folder, and it will work immediately. The strategy is that the user command looks for Fire being in Quad SE. If it is not, it is loaded into Quad SE, and it stays there. I'm not recommending to save that in your session file because that makes updating to a new version more difficult than it should be. But it should stay in the workspace to keep the loading time as low as possible. And I have the feeling that I forgot something. Right, the help file. I forgot the help file. I already pointed out that the blue icons are starting the help file. Oh, that is a little bit big. For that particular option. So whenever you are interested in something and you click at that, you get the appropriate help site. As you can see, the help is laborious. It shouldn't leave any questions open. However, when you're familiar with Fire, you might get annoyed by these damn blue things. Therefore, pressing Ctrl F1 gets rid of it and saves it in the Windows registry, so it doesn't hurt anymore. 4 minutes to go. Any questions?
Yeah. We did for Captain, we usually don't delete rows. We comment them out. We put a comment on them. Can you do that as well? Oh, sorry.
The question is whether it is possible to comment a certain line rather than to change it. This is a different solution, I think. You are looking for doing certain things. You are programming. You are not refactoring. I'm doing exactly the same thing, and actually I have a function key which, when I press it, takes the current line and duplicates it, puts a comment in front of it, adds a timestamp at the end of it, said Jäger changed that at this stage, and then I can change the original one to keep that simple. But it's programming. It's not a process where you try to change hundreds of objects in one go. So I would not consider this to be something I should build into Fire.
I think the point here is that some people keep the change log essentially in the function. So they want to make 100 changes, but they actually do want to keep the old line in the same location so that they don't have to go to a source code management system to get the change history.
Well,
No, some
Fire's
people
not
do
supporting
that.
this. Yeah, but Fire's not supporting this. I mean, we have the same problem at Optima, of course. If we change 800 functions, we have to have a kind of changelog. And that is why we have a dedicated application for that, which allows us to say, when did this function change? And it says in version so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, these guys have changed that thing, and you can compare the version. But this is outside the scope of Fire, at least at the moment. I mean, if many people request it, I need to think about this. Oh, yes, certainly. Any other questions?
I am so impressed by what you made that I would like to try to give you a new idea about something really difficult to do. So maybe you will solve that. We have a very rude and horrible utility which help us looking for where some column of a matrix is used or set. Unfortunately, in many applications, the real data is stored in columns. So we need to know where we use the matrix with this name, the third and fourth column. Our utility is very rude.
Okay.
It's able only to work with square brackets. Can you find something better to do that?
When that is going to change to a 2 at the beginning, version 2.0, you will see this changing. There will be an option which allows you to execute a defined function, which means you use Fire to select certain objects and compile a list of things to go through, but then I call your defined function with the code of that object, and then you can investigate whatever you are interested in and return either 1 or 0, telling me you would like to get rid of that or you would like to include it in the hit list. And the same will happen in the replace dialog, where rather than leaving the replace operation to Fire, you can again execute your own function. In that case, you get the code and you have to return code or an empty vector, which means deleting. And then you can do whatever you like. Because I can't solve everything, naturally, but I can give you the opportunity, for example, to execute or to use quad S and quad R as an example. I tried to incorporate that and came to the conclusion it's much too complex to do this on a general level, but it's much easier to provide the function. And the functions will be executed in a certain namespace. So you get access to, it's wrong, I have to rephrase that. It will get a reference to a namespace as a left argument, and that namespace will give you access to a couple of utilities. So I make life quite easy for you to deal with the code and to search in it. That's the idea, to solve problems I have no idea about.
Fire became kind of interactive operator. You give it. I say after you will do that, I'm waiting for. It's really interesting. Fire will become some strange interactive operator. You will give a function and apply it to.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. I mean, operator means that you define rules to execute a function on an array, right? That's the definition of an operator, and that's exactly what will happen then, yes.
Given that exit that you're going to give to make the change to the function, anybody could solve the problem of putting in the comment. You could do anything you want. In other words, you can.
Yes.
You could comment the old line and put it in yourself. So,
for example.
So yes. I think that's.
It gives you total freedom.
Okay.
Thank you very much.